Okay, so I saw an article that you wrote that was talking about voice cloning. So let's start there. What exactly is that?
So what voice cloning is the use of technology, and that technology is used to create a synthetic copy of someone's voice and speech pattern based on a sample audio recording.
We're seeing a rise in the number of people who are victims of voice cloning. In fact, I was reading a report from CNN that said that potentially millions of people could be affected by voice cloning in terms of scams. So, can you talk a little bit about some examples of how voice cloning is being exploited?
So the fact that there is technology that exists to copy someone's voice and used to create convincing audio clips of them can be exploited in numerous ways, as I'm sure you can imagine. So in the piece that you referenced, we provided an example from pop culture in which a song called Nostalgia went viral on the internet a few years ago. What this song did was it used voice cloning technology to create synthetic copies of the voices of Justin Bieber, Bad Bunny, and Daddy Yankee. After that, there were reports from the media that Bad Bunny became particularly upset that the song that he was never part of, but incorporated the likeness of his voice, was circulating all over the internet. Interestingly, the same thing happened to Celine Dion more recently, a few months ago. She issued a statement that there were unsanctioned AI generated music purporting to contain her name and likeness that was also circulating over the internet. And so obviously, these two examples involve celebrities who are famous for their voices, which are being exploited without their consent. That being said, we can imagine situations where this could also happen on a day-to-day basis as well. So, for example, a voice clone could be used to generate the voice of a loved one to extract money, for example, or for some other improper purpose. And so there are really limitless number of examples in which voice cloning could be used to exploit others.
One of the things that I think is especially worrisome, and I've talked to a number of people who have been victim of these voice clones, is that it's really hard to detect them. And what I mean by that is if you are sent a voice message from someone who sounds exactly like a loved one or sounds exactly like a celebrity, unlike past digital scams where we could actually figure out, okay, this is actually a scam, this is what to do, these are nearly impossible for the average person to detect. Do you think that's one of the issues that we face right now that is making this potentially such a big problem?
Oh, absolutely. It's really hard to tell, and the technology is probably advancing every day. And so that's certainly one of the issues.
And I think there's a lot of awareness about deepfake video, which certainly is on the rise. And I would love to talk to you about that as well. And maybe fewer examples of deepfake audio. But the thing I want to know, which I think is unclear to a lot of Canadians, is what exactly are the laws around both deepfake audio and deepfake video if you are a victim of someone who is targeting you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so it's a bit of a legal patchwork currently in Canada. It seems that victims, however, will probably have some sort of civil recourse, whether that's a potential claim under privacy legislation in the common law, which is the law that's created through court decisions, or potentially both. And so there's three general categories that we'll talk about today that would be applicable to deepfakes as well as voice cloning. So the first is the violation of privacy statutory claims. And so the legislation is provincial. It's not identical across provinces, and not all provinces have it. But generally speaking, it would be a claim under the legislation that pertains to the violation of one's privacy. It's centered on the protection against the unauthorized use of one's likeness. And generally speaking, the language is broad enough to capture a variety of wrongful acts. There is some specific legislation that specifically references the use of one's voice or the misuse of one's voice. So that's the first potential area in which a claim could be brought. The other two are common law claims, and they're called appropriation of personality as well as false light. Appropriation of personality is essentially the exploitation of one's personality for a commercial purpose without their consent. Um,
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that specifically. When you say commercial purpose, would that imply that someone is potentially trying to make money from these videos or these audio files, which of course is not always the case, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So commercial purpose, it's sort of broad. And really the key question is the purpose primarily for commercial exploitation? And with many things with the law, it is really based on what the facts are, right? So the question is, what is the primary purpose of this act?
When we look around the world and look at some of the laws that have been enacted in terms of protecting people from deep fakes, there are some regions that are much more advanced in terms of having those rules and regulations in place. If we look to the EU as one example, also China, why is it taking us so long to be more specific with the laws around this in Canada?
So I would say that generally speaking, the law evolves as there are societal changes, right? So cases that are being brought to the court and litigated reflect what is happening in real life. And so in Canada, the law is emerging in this area. So like I mentioned, there are provinces which have these pieces of privacy legislation creating these statutory claims potentially for victims of deepfake or audio cloning. Currently, as I mentioned, it is kind of a patchwork, so the law is not consistent across the Canadian provinces. They say not currently. But do I think that the law will continue to develop as we see the proliferation of voice clones and deepfakes? I think that seems likely because as things happen, that's how law develops.
It's interesting, and I think during this election cycle, I think more people are becoming aware of deepfakes, in particular how they are affecting potential voters. We've seen an example for an instance on Meta where there are advertisers who are actually advertising deepfakes of one of the main political leaders. This type of awareness, I would hope, is in some ways good for the average Canadian to understand how prevalent this is. But at the same time, it is a bit worrisome that people are going out and paying for advertisements that are featuring these deep fake videos. So what would you say to people who stumble across one of these videos, or maybe they are victims themselves?
Yeah, so what I would say is I think, like with many things on the internet, it's good to be critical of what you're seeing and hearing. If you yourself think that you might be a victim of a deepfake, or if you know that you are because you've seen it, then it's really important to act quickly, especially when things are floating around on the internet. It can spread really quickly, right? And so there is a need to take quick action.
I think one of the confusing things for a lot of Canadians is that they may look at deepfake videos and audio that are impersonating celebrities, and they may sort of understand the intention of that. They may look at deepfake videos and audio that is targeting politicians, and they understand the intent of that to create chaos. But there's also this third category, which is non-consensual porn, which more and more is an issue, especially for young people, where you see that most often it's either women or girls who are depicted in these videos. When you look at something like that, do you think that we need tougher laws around this?
I think the law in Canada currently is really centered on the protection of one's image or likeness, as well as one's ability to use it. And so in my view, I think generally speaking, the law is in terms of the legislation, pretty broad in terms of the statutory language to capture all types of wrongful acts. And so, I think it is a difficult issue to talk about for many people. It is obviously like something very upsetting that can happen, but the crux is really the protection of one's image or likeness, right? And that can capture a variety of different circumstances.
Excellent. Well, listen, for people who want to read more about this issue, where's the best place for them to go? I know your company has some information over on your website.
Yeah. Well, anyone who's interested about reading further can certainly visit our website. If you look me up on our website, you'll see a hyperlink to our past publications, the one that we were speaking about today, as well as a variety of other publications relating to these issues.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Amber.